As promised, John Carpay is here, the president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. John, welcome back. It's been a while. How are you?
I'm doing well, Richard. Glad to be back with you.
So many important cases before the courts right now, and you're right in the middle of these. Let's begin with Jessica Simpson's complaint, which was dismissed against Canada Galaxy Pageants. The Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario has dismissed this complaint from transgender activist Jessica Simpson, formerly Jonathan Yanev, who seems to be in the news every few months. Jonathan had filed this suit against Canada Galaxy Pageants back several years ago, but on July 28th, the court basically said, they dismissed the case. So just tell me what happened here. What was Simpson's claim in this case?
So Galaxy Pageants is an organization that hosts and runs beauty pageants for girls and women. They have a policy that you need to be a woman to participate. You can be a transgender male who has fully transitioned. So if you've had all of the surgeries and you no longer have your male parts, you could go into their change room, which does have girls as young as 6 years old. And when Jessica Simpson, formerly Jonathan Yanev, applied to participate in 2019, Jessica Simpson refused to confirm the status, but at that time, Jessica Simpson had male genitalia and was denied entry and filed a human rights complaint. Now, it was dismissed recently, just in July of 2025, largely on procedural grounds because Jessica Simpson had not met deadlines and completed filing requirements, etc. So we're happy with the outcome, but this is far from over in terms of this transgender ideology being a powerful political force in Canada.
So in other words, the pageant won sort of on a technicality because Simpson's lawyers or his team rather, didn't have their blank together. In other words, they missed filings and so forth. Otherwise, do you think you would have won that case?
Well, the ideology is strongly entrenched. You see in federal prisons, for example, since 2017, when gender expression and gender identity were added to the Canadian Human Rights Act and they were added to the Criminal Code. And since 2017, trans-identifying males are allowed to transfer into women's prisons. And some of these people they're convicted rapists. Many, almost all of them, 90% are convicted of a violent crime or a sexual crime or both. And just by saying that they identify as a woman, they can get a transfer into women's prisons. And so we've had situations of, privacy violations, these men staring at women in the bathroom change room situations. So the Justice Center is providing lawyers to sue the federal government to get rid of this policy that's been in place now for about 8 years.
I know that's a case you're working on right now with the Canadian Women's Sex-Based Rights Organization, CASBAR. But getting back to the Simpson case and the Galaxy pageant, why did this take 5 years?
The process is the punishment. Sadly, our courts in Canada always take, instead of taking weeks or months for a criminal matter, family law matter, civil dispute, breach of contract, constitutional case, instead of taking weeks or months, it always takes years. And there are too few judges. I don't believe the judges are lazy. There might be one or two lazy judges, but on the whole, they're very hardworking people trying to get through as many cases as possible, but we have too few judges. So the federal and provincial governments need to appoint a lot more judges so that we can get through, so that Canadians can get quicker access to justice.
What sort of reforms need to be put in place so that we can't have these frivolous cases dragging on forever and ever?
It's not hard for the Ford government or for any other province to amend the human rights legislation and to to add a clause that says, for greater certainty, human beings with male genitalia are not allowed to go into women's change rooms, women's bathrooms, female sporting competitions. They're not allowed to be volunteers at rape crisis counseling centers. And you put that in there, problem solved. I don't know. Does Doug Ford understand that his government could amend the legislation to put an end to this? I don't know if he does or not. I don't know if this is, and I'm not picking on him. It's every premier in the country can change the legislation to get rid of, obviously stupid and ridiculous claims that should never see the light of day.
I want to move on to this is a case I'm guessing many Canadians are not aware of, and it is talk about government overreach, this time on a First Nations reserve. Terry Wayne Francois, he has been banished by the Cree Nation, exiled essentially from his home and his family without, it would appear, any due process after what sounds like a minor incident at a community check stop back in December of 2024. What happened?
So this was in Manitoba, and Terry had crossed over this checkpoint many times, going on reserve, off reserve for groceries, work, whatever. Single dad, raising 5 daughters. And in December 2024, the people at the checkpoint wanted to, they had a dog there, which they had not had previously, and wanted the dog to go into the car. And Terry objected and said, I don't want the dog in my car, and drove off. And then for this, he was banished from living on the reserve. And so our lawyers have filed an action in federal court to challenge that banishment, which is a pretty severe penalty that was imposed, by the way, without any due process. There was not a hearing or an opportunity for him to defend himself, et cetera, et cetera. It was an edict that was issued by the Bank Council, just like that.
May sound like a pretty naive question, but does the charter apply to First Nation reserves?
Absolutely, it does. We had another case a number of years ago where a band council tried to prevent Virginia Little Wolf from running for band council on the specious grounds that she was in a common law relationship. This was a rule that other people were not following. It was not being enforced, and the rule itself was not valid. And so we won on the basis of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We won the case against the band, and she was allowed to run for band council. So yeah, the charter applies for sure to every inch of Canadian soil, whether it's reserve or not.
All right, that takes us to Evan Blackman's bank account freeze. And again, the JCCF sort of to the rescue here, securing a court order compelling the RCMP and the TD Bank to release records about the freezing of his bank accounts. This was during the 2022 Freedom Convoy protests. He was acquitted of mischief charges in 2023. I believe there's a retrial happening in August of this year. And again, the bank account freeze was enabled by the Emergency Act, which a federal court has ruled unconstitutional, illegal. Tell me more about this case. I mean, I would imagine this could set a precedent for accountability against authoritarian financial crackdowns.
Well, we certainly hope so, because what the government did in February of 2022 was just horrific. There was no due process. It was instantly treating Canadians donating to an entirely peaceful protest, suddenly had their bank accounts frozen, and the banks were all too compliant. They could have pushed back against these federal edicts and said, well, wait a minute. So we do have a court ruling, which the Justice Centre was involved in that case, where the court ruled in January 2024. Justice Mosley of the federal court ruled that the federal government's use of the Emergencies Act was illegal. The freezing of bank accounts was an unjustified violation of the charter right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure. The measures cracking down on the protests were unreasonable, unjustified violations of the freedoms of expression and peaceful assembly. So we have a powerful court ruling that the federal government's conduct was illegal. Now, how that applies to the Evan Blackman case is that he was already acquitted. Unfortunately, the Crown appealed, so there's a retrial. If he is acquitted again, our lawyers are going to argue that because of the government's egregious conduct in freezing his bank account, the charges should be stayed. So even if there's a conviction, there should not be a criminal record. And so in that context, the judge has ordered the RCMP and the TD Bank to turn over documents to the court for the judge to review, to look at the freezing of Evan Blackman's bank account. So that's a wonderful step forward towards accountability.
What implications might there be for future government use of emergency powers with this case?
You know, a lot of people complain, and I think with good reason, about how we don't have enough accountability. In the Prime Minister and Cabinet illegally used the Emergencies Act when there was not a true national emergency as required by the legislation. They didn't comply with the legislation, and there's no accountability there. Meanwhile, you've got people like Tamara Leach and Chris Barber and so many others that are facing criminal charges, and in some cases getting criminal convictions over participating in a peaceful protest, which is very worrisome. And perhaps we need the Emergencies Act to, I don't know, to have some teeth in it for greater accountability for federal officials.
That brings us to another debanking. There was the bank freezing, and now we have a debanking situation. Eva Chipyak, by the Royal Bank of Canada, a Freedom Convoy lawyer, abruptly debanked by RBC after minor cryptocurrency transactions. And this echoes the freezing of something like 200 accounts during the 2022 protests under the Emergency Act. The RBC is claiming this is not political. It has something to do with, I don't know, unusual banking activity. What do you make of this?
Well, I'd like to hear of a lawyer that was not involved in Freedom Convoy that's having their bank account frozen. I don't think it's happening. The banks are supposedly they're private actors, and the charter does not apply to them. However, they are subject to federal regulations, and I think it's important for the federal government to amend the banking legislation or the regulations, either or both, to simply state that the banks cannot discriminate on the basis of political opinion or peaceful political activity. Because this is not the first time I've heard of this. I mean, I've heard it firsthand, secondhand, thirdhand. There are people who are not aligned with the woke politics, equity, diversity, inclusion. They're not, progressive, and they face these debanking situations, which appear to be politically motivated. And obviously, purchasing cryptocurrency, I don't know how many people are doing that. I suspect it's a huge number. Why that should be anybody's business or the concern of a bank is just ridiculous. So I think the federal government needs to change those regulations and tell the banks you cannot discriminate based on political opinion.
Right. Not a lot of transparency in RBC's decision to terminate Eva's accounts. Are there legal mechanisms you can pursue to compel banks to provide clear justification for debanking that would, I guess, balance privacy with accountability?
It would be possible for this lawyer to sue the Royal Bank. It might be an uphill fight. The banks tend to have a lot of money, obviously, and they've got a big legal department. They would probably fight it tooth and nail. The court action would be very expensive. But conceivably, if the resources were there, she could sue them. And then in the context of the lawsuit, she could probably find more information because sometimes a lawsuit can kind of smoke out what somebody's real reasons are. You can't keep on hiding behind the pretext that was provided initially.
All right. I was telling listeners we may have some breaking news regarding Sean Feucht. This is the American pastor, musician, pro-MAGA individual who was touring Canada, only to find that some of his venues and tours concerts were being canceled by municipalities. Of course, he was in Montreal. Police entered the church. The church was fined because he was, I don't know, worshiping without a permit. The police stood by as protesters launched a smoke bomb into the church. Just even the CBC now sort of backing off a little bit and saying, well, maybe there was a little bit of censorship going on here. The breaking news is what?
He has, so far, to the best of my knowledge, he's gotten large crowd, thanks to the CBC smear job, calling him a MAGA musician, when in fact he is a Christian musician who happens to be a Republican supporter. I'm sure if he was a Christian musician who supported the Democrats, the CBC wouldn't call him a Democrat musician. They would just leave it alone. But they can't stand the fact that there's people in this world who don't share the CBC's opinions about Donald Trump or abortion or homosexuality or transgender issues or whatever else. So his concerts are in all the places where he's been canceled, and it's totally wrong, by the way. It's illegal for governments to discriminate against somebody because of their religious or political beliefs. There has to be state neutrality. But in all the places where the government-owned or government-run venue canceled, he still managed to have a concert somewhere else. Lawyers are in place to defend the church in Montreal, which hosted the worship service. We'll have to wait and see where that goes. He's being accused, the church is being accused of holding a concert without a permit. But, the issue at trial is going to be, well, is this really a concert when you've got a guy with a few other people going up to the front and playing their guitars and playing the drums, and they're doing a worship service? The city might have a hard time trying to prove that that's a concert.
So the Parks Canada, the City of Moncton, Montreal, and Charlottetown now perhaps facing legal action?
That's going to be up to the organization, I think it's called Burn 24/7. The organization that is managing the tour could, in theory, could sue the city of Charlottetown and city of Moncton and so on and so forth. I can't predict what their instructions will be, but I would not be surprised if they said, look, we don't want to start a whole bunch of court actions. You also run the risk of having the court say, well, it's moot, it's over and done with, it's no longer relevant, which would be a bad decision, because I think we do need clarity. But you're likely to, or there's a good chance that these venues are going to succeed in arguing before the court that it's moot. And so then, it turns out to be a bit of waste of time, effort, and energy to pursue them legally.
And will JCCF be involved in these cases?
Our lawyers are in discussion with Sean Foyt's with the organization that's managing the tour. So, and there's more to come, because there are concerts scheduled for Western Canada. So we're in discussions with them to provide support for freedom of expression.
Well, the JCCF has never been needed more than it is right now. Well, in fact, over the last 4 or 5 years. How can we find out more about the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, get involved, and support you?
So our website is www.jccf.ca. So JCCF is Justice Center Constitutional Freedoms, jccf.ca. And if you're interested in you can sign up for a free newsletter. If you want to donate, we do not ask for or receive any government funding, so people are welcome to donate online. And we'll get an official tax receipt in February for your donation. And we're going to keep on fighting hard in court cases all across Canada.
John, appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for yours. Have a great rest of the day.